end this year well, and I'm not going to think about next year until the summer. So look what's in front of you today, because I'm going to tell you this, the homeschool journey is short, and it doesn't last forever. Even if you homeschool from kindergarten to 12th, like we did, and we're going to do it for all of them, Lord, if that's the way the Lord chooses, it's still short when you compare it to the relationship that you have with your children that will last forever, and the relationship that you have with the Lord and your children have with the Lord that is eternal. So while the homeschooling journey is a great tool for discipleship, and it's a great way to be with your family and build your family, don't get it backwards. Don't give it more importance than the relationship. The relationship is here, and the homeschool will be here as well if the relationship is set. It makes those teen years much easier when you have that foundation set early on. But just remember that no year is going to be perfect, and when you get to the end of the year and you're burnt out and you're overwhelmed and you're tired, say, Lord, what are you teaching me in all of this? And how do I respond to the circumstances, right? Because it's not about what's going on around us, but how we behave in the difficult times and in the circumstances. I want to talk a little bit about real life learning. I talk about that in the book as well. Life has been our greatest teacher. Life skills and teaching independence and teaching real life. But I also want to say, you can write this one down too, the most important life skill that you will teach your child, not how to buy a house, balance a checkbook, not how to do all these practical things, is to follow God in all they do. The most important life skill you are teaching your children is to seek God first. Matthew 6:33 has been our life verse, our ministry verse, our homeschool verse, our family verse. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. We must teach our children how to do that. And giving them a checklist of things and being so focused on academics, but not teaching them to follow God, you're going to be raising some very smart children that are going to graduate. But how will they know how to hear the Lord's voice when they're out of your house? How will they know how to discern? This world is crazy. I believe now more than ever the world is, I can't even, every day the headlines shock me with what is going on. This is more important than ever. I'm giving a session tomorrow about Bible-based homeschooling where I'm going to be talking about how we use the Bible just for 1 year to teach our children all their subjects, kind of like a fun experiment. So I talk about how to do that, but I don't expect everyone to go home and do that. The overall theme is no matter what curriculum you choose, you must teach them to have the Bible and the Word of God as the foundation for all that they do. And so that's the most important life skill that you will teach. We always believed in using real life. I would always say that I'm a loosey-goosey homeschooler. I'm not a type A person. So, I always feel like, I'm so inadequate because there's all those people who are like, read, SATs, get the best scores, da-da-da-da. And I'm like, let's go, play in nature today. And so when my daughter graduated, I don't know, is anyone like me? Because sometimes I feel a little bit different among homeschoolers. But when my daughter graduated, the first week that she was gone, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the end of that transition from homeschool to college. Boy, was it difficult for me. But one of the things that was difficult, and it's not difficult anymore, she's doing amazing, but one of the things that was difficult for me, I had never done an academic co-op with her. She had never taken an online academic class aside from our homeschool. She had done a program for fine arts, but no academics. I felt a little bit like people were like, you don't do a co-op, and you don't do online, and you're not doing dual enrollment. We didn't do any of that. And she went off to college, and I thought, wow, this is it. Everyone's going to find out that Karen DeBuse had no idea what she was doing this whole time. She's going to fail out of college. She's going to come home. And everything I've spoken about all these years is going to come tumbling down. just being honest. If you ever come to my sessions or you hear my podcast or you see my videos online, I am 100% completely real and honest with you. I do not put up I will tell you, this is exactly how I felt. I laid there in my bed and thought, everybody's going to find out what a failure of a homeschool mom I was. How could I send her to college? She's going to have no clue. Well, let me tell you, she has done phenomenally well, far beyond, in the beginning everything was like, what would you get on the paper? What was your grades? I was so like hovering. Now I don't even know her schedule and I don't care. She's done amazing. She has academic scholarships and all that, but that is not the point. She really surprised me in that, guess what? Homeschoolers, they can function in the real world. They're independent. She even says so many people are like, oh, you were homeschooled? Yes, So if you're a little bit like me and you feel weird because you're not the type A, blah, 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 we have to be super overachievers, she's doing just fine. So we try to use this idea of we fit school into our life. We don't try to fit our life around school. And I know some of you probably want to walk out right now because you're like, oh, but that's how we are. Like, people would say in the beginning, when I had a lot of people against me homeschooling, how are you going to prepare them for real life? And I was like, because they're living in real life with me every single day. They're going to the grocery store with me. They're doing the errands with me. When we moved, they understood mortgages and attorney review and real estate, right? I think my oldest was 14 at the time and the youngest was 6, and now they know all about that. So when you're being immersed in real life, my husband has his own business. I do my ministry. They're seeing real life in action all the time. We have really let them pursue their interests and really use a lot of their time. So 6 years ago, we moved out to our little hobby farm. And my littlest guy, if you guys follow me on Instagram, he's here, but they just left. My little farmer boy, who I'm always posting about, which he's very shy. I'm like, I'm posting about you. He's like, oh, but I'm like, but people like to see a 12-year-old boy who has no interest in technology, who has no interest in, he does like video games, but no social media on phone or anything like that. I'll be honest with you, he hardly knows how to use a computer, which I know at this point, he needs to do. But he knows more about animals. He has 13 chickens. He has 2 goats and 2 ducks. And we've had various other chickens and ducks over the years. And he takes care of them every single day, no matter what the weather, in the blizzards, in the cold. He does their water. He does their food. He takes care of them. He goes out and grooms the goats. He's just been so disciplined with this as his passion. He wants to be a farmer. My other son is 16. Last year, shortly before we came out to teach them diligently, he had just begun his own business. He's been my challenging one, and he's okay with me saying that. I talk about it. We did a whole podcast episode together, so if you have a challenging one, meaning one that can't sit still, one that's very loud, and one that will challenge you every step of the way when they're little, boy, if you channel that energy, he now is using all of that strong will for good. I've seen it happen. So he has a Christian skateboarding company. He's mad at me because I put this up. These are his old designs. I promised him I would let you guys know. He has lots of new, beautiful designs that my husband illustrates. And their company is called Sling and Stone, and it's on Instagram, Sling and Stone Skateboards, Sling and Stone for David and Goliath. But he hand makes, so what's in the picture in the middle is a full-size skateboard, but I don't know if you have young kids, but there's a big thing, these finger boards. They're like miniature boards. He hand makes them and shapes them, and they're beautiful, and he's got a really great little business going on. He's probably not going to go to traditional 4-year college, and he's learning so many skills. So he has challenges in school. He has a lot of challenges to sit down and do his schoolwork. But we are able at home to really help him, and he's become so disciplined in his business. So it's been a beautiful thing to see. I also learned over the years that if I don't keep my eyes on the Lord, forget it. There have been so many times where I was ready to put them in school because I didn't know what I was doing, and I thought this was the worst thing in the world. I'm failing my children. But those were also the years I took my eyes off the Lord and forgot that he called me to this journey and he would equip me. Many years I could barely hold it together. I don't know about you, but there's been mornings where I'm like, I don't even want to get up and go downstairs. Again, I'm going to admit that to you because I'm sure there's somebody else out here that feels that way. But I always remember that I don't hold it all together, but I have a God who holds all things together. And he has held our homeschool together. And I really, truly, truly believe because we focused on relationships in our family, and we focused on the relationships over books. Now, I'm not saying books aren't important, and I'm not saying academics aren't important, but you have to put everything in its proper place. And so I believe that if you are building your family on the foundation of the Word of God, and you're building a strong family together, the academics will naturally fall into place. Because if they're following God, they're going to want to do well, and they're going to put academics in its proper place. Or like my son, there are many days where he'll be working on his business, and I'm like, you know what, don't worry about math. This is really what's teaching you right now. And that's okay. You don't have to finish every page and every problem in the book. He's learning so much. Like my little guy, the 12-year-old with the farm, or he takes care of the farm. That is his science. I mean, he can tell you everything about animals, and he reads all these books about animals, and he knows so much. It just doesn't look what we usually think of as traditional schooling. But anyway, back to the relationships. It's not that books and knowledge and, learning isn't important. In fact, we talk about how important it is in our home. But the relationships definitely trump all the books. And there were many years in our homeschool where we had a hard day, and I was like, you know what, let's just put the books away right now, because nobody's learning anything when their attitudes aren't good. And we had our struggles over the years, but I truly believe I can say this now that we're getting ready to graduate another one. Praise the Lord, I did not put test scores over my child's heart. Because now I have my girl off at school who texts me, with all the things going on, and our relationship is so special. And I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. Just like I said before, the homeschooling journey, it ends, but your relationships go on forever. And so if you focus, especially in the early years, on building those relationships, then when you have hard days, then when you have teenage years, then when you have college and beyond, you have that strong foundation together and building that family on the Word of God. And sometimes the bumps in the road are necessary. I mean, we had some seasons in our homeschool that were very difficult. You know how I said before how you're always waiting for the perfect year and it never happens? Because you don't foresee things that happen. We had job loss multiple times before my husband began his own business. We had death in the family. We had illness. We had emergencies. We had beautiful things too, like a baby one year that interrupts everything in homeschooling. But what lessons they learn, because you're preparing them for life and not a test. We had one year that was so difficult. Within 5 months, we went to 5 funerals. They weren't even for older, sick, expected things. These were 2 of them in the matter of 2 months. Homeschool family, friends, young fathers died completely unexpectedly. We had a complete tragedy one summer with another death. We had 5 funerals in 5 months. I remember saying to my husband, I hadn't been to 5 funerals by the time I was an adult, and our kids just went for 5 months in a row. But looking back, and we got hardly any school done at that time, but looking back, they saw how mommy and daddy handled crisis and tragedy and how Christians come together. They saw real life in action. And so sometimes there were bumps in the road, whether they were big bumps like that one year or just little bumps where you're like, can you please clean your room? Can you please do the laundry? I mean, I'm going to tell you now, the kids are old. We still have the same thing. We still have the same issues, right? So you still have those small bumps, big bumps, attitudes, discipline, the years where the curriculum is hard or whatever. But instead of looking at it as, well, here goes another bad day, look at it as, you know what? We are going to figure out why this is happening and how can I handle this so that we can build our family even stronger. We're all coming off of a very difficult year, right? All of us. And during that time, I couldn't help but think, we are teaching our kids to either say, this is horrible, this is awful, let's, whatever opinion you have about everything, we can teach them all that, or we can say, wow, what is God trying to get our attention, and how are we going to respond? And I would look at Paul. He wrote the book of Philippians while in jail. And the book of Philippians is called the book of joy. He never lost sight of the gospel. And so it doesn't matter if there's a pandemic going on. It doesn't matter what's going on. It's going on. How are we going to respond so that our children can see our faith in action? Paul, you read through Philippians, he's not over there saying, oh, I'm in jail, oh, this is horrible, oh, woe is me. He's over there saying, consider it joy. He's over there saying, rejoice in all things. He's saying all these wonderful, beautiful things. There's always purpose. So God may not change the circumstances, but he will change us in them, right? And he will want us to respond in a certain way. So often bumps in the road are necessary. There's no growth without them. All right, so moving on to my mantra, because I write at Simply Living for Him, which is my ministry. I've always talked about keeping all things simple and not getting too wrapped up. The biggest lesson I've learned over the years was to keep it simple, whether it's curriculum or schedules or all that stuff that comes along with homeschooling, right? And it's hard to say that when there's an exhibit hall full of things that everybody wants to go and buy, right? And we have so much amazing resources. It's wonderful. But I'm telling you this now as somebody who has an adult daughter and an adult son, all of that stuff does not take the place of your relationship with your child. Don't get so caught up in searching for the perfect curriculum, because guess what? There isn't one. They're all good. We are lucky to have so many choices. Don't be like me who spent the early years. Tomorrow I'm actually giving a session for new homeschoolers, but really they're lessons for all homeschoolers. And I talk about this. In the early years, all I did was chase after the next thing. I was so busy planning my homeschool, I wasn't even homeschooling. Right? You get it, right? You get it. I was so busy onto the next homeschooling blog and onto the next homeschooling website and the next homeschooling Instagram account and what can I learn from all this? I wasn't even focusing on actually homeschooling. I was always living for that idea in my head that never happened. So don't get distracted. That's what I talk about at Simply Living for Him in my ministry. I do daily devotionals on YouTube. And one of the things I talk about often is don't get distracted. Satan wants to distract you. You know why? Homeschooling brings God glory. Homeschooling brings families together. You can raise your children in the Lord. So that means automatically you have a target on your back. Because Satan doesn't want you to do those things. He wants you to focus on all the worldly things and get distracted. Simple has been the best thing for us, to constantly remind myself, does this really matter in the end? And guess what? You are not enough, and you certainly cannot do this. You know how I said my homeschooling consulting clients always tell me that they're ruining it? Guess what? You cannot do it on your own. People always would say to me, how do you do all the things you do? You homeschool and you speak and you write. And I'm like, I'm not like a superwoman. I serve a super God, right? There is no way 16 years ago, when I was this scared mom who had no idea about homeschooling, had my parents telling me that we were going to ruin our children, their grandchildren, people thinking I was crazy. There is no way I have any business standing up here today as a homeschool speaker and author. But that's what God does. And I don't say that at all to say, like, look what I've done. Oh my goodness, if you knew me, you'd be like, I'm the least likely that ever should have homeschooled. So homeschooling will keep you humble, and that's where you should be. Because we have to rely on God. You will not be a successful homeschooling mother in your own strength. Homeschooling requires a humble spirit to say, Lord, I surrender my whole day to you. Lord, I surrender my whole homeschool to you. Lord, if this year is difficult, as long as it's your will, I'll walk through it. Many years ago, I started doing this thing where I pray in the morning with my palms up. I was sitting on my balcony before here I was like, I wonder if anyone sees me out there. You know? And I do that because I'm the type that holds on to what I want really tightly. I'll say, oh Lord, I surrender it to you. But I'm like this, Lord, I surrender it to you, but only if it's what I want. But when I do this, it literally physically releases my grip on the world. And I say, okay, Lord, whatever, and I prayed for this, whatever, Lord, you want me to say. Whatever happens, we're driving down here yesterday and, they're saying there's going to be all these storms and tornadoes and, there's a pandemic. All these things are going on, And in my head, it's like, why? Why are we going? And it's like, Lord, we're going because you told me to. And I believe it's because there's somebody here who needs to hear this message. I believe it's because people need to be pointed back to God during this time. And remember, homeschooling is not your whole life. It's just a way of life, right? I would rather people say, Karen DeBuse, she loves Jesus, than to say, Karen DeBuse, she's a homeschool mom. Because homeschooling is not our identity, especially because, like I said, it ends. So homeschooling moms have to be humble, have to put it all into God's hands, have to let him lead. It's very prideful. When we say, all the things that we do. No, we only do them in his strength. So when we recognize that this journey is all about him leading us, I write about that in my book called Home, that is where you find your true success. Letting God lead you, surrendering to him every single day. I ask my clients all the time, when they're all stressed out and overwhelmed and burnt out, have you been praying about this? They're like, I'll pray about it when I make the decision, then I'll ask God to bless it. No. We should be operating out of our relationship with the Lord. That's why I started the Simply Living for Him online women's community, so that we are equipping women to be in the Word, to live your life out of his Word, not to add his Word into your life, right? And so that's the same thing for our homeschool. You operate out of his Word. You don't add the Word into your homeschool. So you submit and you surrender to it all. Remember that you are building a child and not just a transcript. One little sheet of paper should not define your whole entire homeschool journey. I remember when my daughter was getting ready to apply to colleges and I had to do this transcript, and I'm like, how on earth do I summarize this complex being filled with great talents and gifts and abilities into this one little piece of paper? You don't, and so it kind of boggles my mind where people spend, lots of money and time on making this just so they can get into a college. If it's his will for your child to go to Harvard, then I believe that's where he will lead them. If it's his will for them to be a missionary and go around the world, then that's where he will lead them. But you won't know that if you're not operating out of his Word and spending time with him and teaching your children to hear his voice. I always told my kids, now we have another high schooler, he's not going the traditional college route next year. And if anybody wants to hear about that separately, I can share. But he is going off to a Christian gap year program. He had no idea what he wanted to do. And I said, guess what? You're normal, right? I'm not doing anything I thought I would do at 18. And so people will say, oh, they have to get into college and we have to build the transcript. No, you have to build a child who's going to be a godly young adult. And following after God will write the transcript. Follow after him first. Don't be afraid of the teen years. I have to tell you this. I always thought, ooh, teenagers, that sounds so scary. I have 3 teenage boys now. Well, one's 12, so he's on the cusp. One's 16 and 18. I tell them every day, these are the best years of my life. They are so funny. They take care of me like gold. I have it set. I said, when I'm a little old lady, they're going to be pushing me around. They take care of me. We have so much fun together, but that is because I invested in them more than the academics. Again, I'm not saying, don't leave here and say, Karen DeBew said academics don't matter. They do, but they have their place. I invested in our family, and now to sit around the table, and they know me. If we're laughing and joking and an hour goes by, they're like, do we really have to start school? Because we're having so much fun together. They know how I am. And I'm like, I know, we should just sit here all morning and have fun. But we have a great balance, because then I'll say, seriously, guys, you've got to do your work, and then it's okay. My middle one, and he's okay with me saying this, used to complain for, I think, 13 or 14 years. Every single day, why do we have to do school? Well, let's see, from K to the age of 14. Why do we have to do school? I don't want to do school. And I would say, complaining about it doesn't mean today I'm going to say, guess what? We're not going to do it because I finally had enough. I would say, you can complain, but school doesn't go anywhere until you're 18. And a couple of years ago, he stopped. He's now 16, and I asked him recently, what happened? He said, I just realized it didn't do any good to complain, so I figured I might as well focus on my schoolwork. So the maturity comes. The maturity definitely comes, but you've got to stick with it, and you've got to invest in that child. Point them to Jesus in everything. Point them to the Lord and say, is this how God would want you to behave in this situation? You have to point to them. Okay, I know I'm running out of time. I could go on and on about all this. Like I said, if you want to talk at any time, let me know. I also have 2 more sessions tomorrow, and Saturday I have one. Is 10 things every new homeschooler should know. But again, it's for anyone. They're good lessons. And then the one on Bible-based homeschooling. But I also want you to know, before we end, that the transition, if you have one that's going to go off to college someday, or they're going to go off to adulthood, well, I shouldn't say if, because they're all going to be adults someday. It's hard. But after my daughter left, I was like, why didn't anyone tell me about this? So I'm going to tell you about it real quick, because I know we have no time. It's hard. But just like I said before, when your homeschool days get hard and God has a purpose in it, God taught me so much. He taught me that I had to walk through it and not around it. I had to feel the grief that came. It was okay. It was difficult. I missed her immensely. When you're with somebody every day and all of a sudden they're gone, the whole dynamic of the house changed. But then there were good changes as well. And she's doing so great out there. Who would I be to say, you have to stay home with me forever? She's got a beautiful life she's living. She's pursuing ministry. She's doing so great on her own. She's an adult. This was what I was supposed to do, right? So I'm telling you now, when you get to that point someday, if it feels hard, that doesn't mean it's wrong. Because I almost was like, well, I don't really think we should send her because this doesn't feel good to send her away. No, it was the right thing, because key is that we followed God. It wasn't the right thing because you're supposed to go to college. It wasn't the right thing because grandma wanted her to go to college. It was the right thing because God led her. So that's very important to remember. And again, the palms up. God's plans are always better than our own. Palms up every day. Surrender your homeschool. Surrender your family. Focus on your family more than the academics. And then the academics will be put in their proper place. It's funny when your words come back. Sometimes my daughter will come back and they boomerang. The words I used to speak to her come back to me now. And just this morning she texted me, I'm praying for you in your sessions today. That makes it all worth it. That makes everything worth it. So focus on your family. above the academics, above the transcript. This is all in my book, The Simple Homeschool Journey, which is available on Amazon. I do have some here when I come down after if you want to look at them. Those are my other books. And again, I have the Bible-based homeschooling e-course, which is 20 videos about how we use the Bible as our main textbook. I also have a Simplify Your Homeschool e-course, which is really a e-course not to tell you how to get the best planner and organize. Simplify by putting God at the center of your homeschool. It's definitely more of a spiritual aspect. And then the Simply Living for Him online community and my podcast. You can find all of these things at my website at Simply Living for Him. And if you have any questions afterwards, I'll be here for a few minutes. I'm so glad you guys came. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your event.